Hello, everybody. Welcome to this web development workshop for Hack the Hill. We'll start off by presenting some of the most basic elements of web development and progressively get towards more advanced concepts. In addition to vanilla, JavaScript, HTML, and CSS, the topics covered in this workshop, the second half, we'll be exploring React and Next.js. Yeah, okay. So that's kind of the run of show for today. So yeah, we'll be seeing some HTML and CSS, and then exploring how JavaScript can come in and make that interactive, and some of the ways that we did that before we had proper frameworks, and how we do it now, and how that kind of evolution has impacted web development, and the way that we are currently doing web development with a lot of server-first approaches. All right, I'll give the microphone to Stefan to begin the workshop and cover some of those concepts we talked about at the start. Thank you.
Hello everybody, I'll be your presenter for the first part of this workshop. So, today we're going to learn how to make websites, and we're going to start with the basics. So who here, by raise of hands, has Visual Studio installed? So who has Visual Studio installed in this room? Okay. Yeah, nice. Cool. If you don't, it's recommended. It's a great text editor. Otherwise, you can actually do this on like Notepad or whatever else you prefer. Okay, so just the basics of a website, right? So you open your computer, you go on a web browser, and then you type in a link, and then somehow there's a web page that appears. How does that work? So you actually send that link to some sort of a host, usually a server, and then this host will return back a file. This file is an HTML file, and that's what makes the website appear. So website is composed of HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. 3 different programming languages that work together. And we're going to cover this today. So HTML. HTML represents the structure of a website. It stands for Hypertext Markup Language. Hypertext because it's like a text that links to other text on the internet, and markup because it's a language made up of tags. So let's start by creating a folder. So you guys can go on your desktop anywhere you want. Just create a folder, simple folder, and inside this folder, create a file. So I'll do it with you guys. So I'll go on my desktop. Oh, wait, I apologize for the someone messed up my desktop, but okay. So you create a folder, and you can name this folder whatever you want. Don't get distracted. So then here, new file. You create like a text file, and then name it with the extension index.html. Okay, you can say yes here. Where's the warning? And this file, you can open it in whatever you want. You can open it like in block note, right? Doesn't really matter. Okay. So once you have this done, great, we can continue. Okay. Now in this file, you guys type this. So like less than and exclamation mark doc type HTML. So this is just this first line that is always there in HTML files. It just says that this is an HTML file basically. After this, we can write our first tag ever, right? The HTML tag. So a tag looks like this, right? So you got minus and bigger equal signs, the tag name, and there's a closing tag as well. And you can put content in between those. Instead of the HTML, we're going to type the head and the body tag. This is a basic HTML structure that is used everywhere. It's a standard. Inside the head tag, you can put the title tag and whatever you want in there. I called it my website. And inside of the body tag, you can just type text, whatever text you wish. Once you have this done, and you double click on your index.html to open it on your browser, you'll see a website appear called my website and with the hello world content in it, or whatever text you put there. Does this work for everyone? Please raise your hand if this works. Okay. Yeah. Perfect. All right. So now we're just gonna explore some HTML tags. So as you can see, we can just write whatever we want. So the body tag is gonna be where your content of the website goes. Meanwhile, in the head tag that we saw earlier, that's just some data. Right. So we're gonna focus on body tag. Inside there, we could use, let's say, the I tag for italic, and in between this tag, everything's gonna be italic text. There's the U tag for underlined text, the B tag for bold text. Right? Just gonna change a bit the formatting of text. And you can see there that I was missing some space, and hello awesome is on the first line, but world's on the second line. But on the website, it's still on a single line, right? So what's happening there? Well, in HTML, line breaks are not, this doesn't work like that. You have to specify it. So with a tag, of course, the BR tag. BR tag stands for break line tag. And you'll see now there's 2 lines. So there's some very basic tags here. You can already see some customization capabilities for HTML. Then there's a P tag. This is a bit better than having line breaks everywhere. So this just simply separates your paragraphs or your lines simply. There's also the heading tags. So those are for titles. There's headings 1 to 6, so H1 to 6. And so you can use, H1 for title, H2 for like a subtitle, and so on. And if you want to make a bullet point list, you can use the UL. And inside the UL, you put a lot of LE. So UL stands for unordered list. And in there, you put list items, and you just list whatever you want. There's also the ordered list alternative, which is going to number your list instead of having bullet points. There's also some really cool interactive tags. So the button, to click it, the input for like a text input, and if you want to make a drop down, you can use the select and option tags. The input tag can be customized a lot, so I recommend you guys check out the HTML input tag online. Like it can be, for instance, converted into a checkbox and so on. And as you can see, that's how you make comments in HTML. So with the exclamation mark dash dash tag. So those won't be rendered, those are just simple comments. You can also put links, right? Because it's a website. So it's called the A tag for anchor. And you see here, it's a bit different. There's actually something new in this tag. So the href part is actually called an attribute. So you can put attributes in HTML tag to further customize them. So the A tag takes the href attribute, which is the link. So I just put a YouTube link in there. You can put image tag. It's important that it's called img, not image. Image won't work. And then you can specify the source, so the link of your image, its width and height. And there you go, you got an image. It also works with GIFs as well, as you can see. Now we're going to start and try to make a table. So table with columns and rows. All right, so we write a table. TR for table row. So we're going to have a bunch of table rows. And in each of these table rows, we're going to go ahead and put some table cells. There's 2 types of cells. There's TH and TD, so table header, very useful for like the first row usually, and TD for table division. That's what it stands for. So TD is those are like really table cells, right? So inside the table there's table rows, and inside the table rows there's table cells, and it makes a table. But table is kind of weird. Like there's no lines in between. So we're gonna see that later how to add those lines. But for now, I want you to guys guess what is the most used HTML tag in the world. What does it do basically? Yes. Whoa, you already knew. That's crazy. Yeah, so the most used HTML tag in the world is called div. Right? And it does like absolutely nothing. That's why it's the most used tag. Because you can go ahead and customize it, that's why. Also the span tag, that's pretty similar. But we'll see that later. The slight difference between div and span. And finally, let's close out with some HTML resources. You guys can go online and check out all the HTML tags. There's like hundreds. I showed you guys the most basic ones. the HTML input types, and you can also change your icon of the website with what's called the favicon. So, as well, the W3 Schools is a great resource to know more about HTML. Now let's move on to CSS. The looks. We're gonna add some style to our website. So CSS stands for Cascading Style Sheets. Cascading because it's made of rules that override themselves, and style is for the appearance of our website. All right. So similar as earlier, we're gonna go on our desktop and not get too distracted. But okay. We're gonna call this style.css. Okay, press yes again. And there you go. You can open this in block mode as well. I'm gonna do it like this, Okay. And then we can keep on going. We're gonna put all of our styles in there. Okay. So now we're gonna start by knowing that we have this style existing, right? So in our HTML file, everything points to the HTML file. So the HTML file needs to know about all the other files of your website. So here, you gotta write a link, URL style sheet, href, and then your style CSS file. That just tells HTML that your file exists and that you're including it in this website. Now we're gonna switch over to the CSS file. So this is what the CSS file looks like. So there's a selector, and in between curly brackets, there's gonna be just a bunch of properties and values. That's basically what CSS is. So let's explore a couple of CSS properties. So there's a color property for text color. So here I chose red. So there's a bunch of predefined color tags in CSS. But you can also specify RGB values like this. And each component, RGB, red, green, blue, is ranging from 0 to 255. 0 being like no light, so dark, black, and then 255 being max light, right, white, and not everywhere. You can also specify a alpha component to it with RGBA. Alpha stands for transparency. There's also the color code. You can specify color code with transparency. There's basically a bunch of different ways of representing color in CSS. There's also background color. That's going to be your background color of your element. So here's the slight difference between div and tags, div and span. So div is really like a box around your text. Meanwhile, if you look at span, it really follows the text, more like a highlight, right? So span is really gonna be exactly on the text. Meanwhile, div is gonna be a box. There's texting to link your text right, center, left. And there's a bunch of font customization. So you can specify which font you want with font family, the font size. You see font size there, just 20, but also px at the end. Px stands for pixels. So you also, when there's a size, you always got to specify a number and then in unit. There's a couple of units in CSS, but pixels is like the most straightforward. It just stands for pixel. Font weight, font style for like bold, italic, and then underline as well. You don't need to use the U, I, and B tags all the time. You can use CSS instead. There's a border. Border width, style. There's a couple of styles. I chose double there, but you could have single and dotted and whatnot, and a color. And this is exactly what would be useful to customize our table from earlier, so that we can really have a defined table with borders. We can also specify like a single side of your border. And you can also, you see it's kind of wordy here, so you can also combine all these in a single line. So border, and then your size, style, and color on the same line with a border tag. And there's a border radius, which is going to have your rounded corners there. And then if you want to add some space, there's a couple of ways. So padding is going to add space to your element inside of it, right? And margin is going to do the opposite. It's going to give you space around your element. Yeah, little detail here. You can actually specify like padding, margin, both work the same. Like just one number is gonna give you like on all sides. 2 numbers is gonna be you like horizontal and vertical. You can also specify like 4 numbers for like each different size of top, left, down, bottom. Yeah. And then you can just specify the width and height directly with pixel values or whatever units you prefer. And yeah, there's some pretty cool tags. You got box shadow here, with gives you a shadow on your element. So this one works. You give it like an offset of your shadow, a little blur, little spread component, and then some color, and you got a shadow. You can also have multiple shadows if you separate them by commas. There's also text shadow. This looks more like a glowing of text. Pretty cool as well. Now we saw some CSS properties, but there's CSS selectors. So right now I've just been customizing the div element so far. But what if we have multiple elements on our website? We just want to customize a couple of them, not all of them. That's what CSS selectors are for. So the first one is just selecting by the tag. So right, div, okay, or span, right? What we can go ahead and do is specify an ID on our elements, like cyan or aquamarine, and then if we use the hashtag and then the ID name on your CSS, it's going to customize this specific item only with the ID and nothing else. But the ID is special because it can only be assigned to a single element. So usually what we end up doing is using class most of the times, because then you can use class on a couple of elements and style all these elements at the same time. And yeah, that's it for CSS. Here's some really cool things to look out for. So there's animation. There's a bunch more selectors. You can like select elements that are within elements and so on. There's transformation for like 3D and so on. Transitions to have like smooth transition between states. Yeah, you can also have a responsive website. So a responsive website is a website that works on any device, computer, iPad, iPhone, and it resizes itself correctly on each device and renders properly. And this is all done in CSS. Now we're going to move on to JS, JavaScript, the functionality. So JavaScript, but JavaScript does not have anything to do with Java. Like they're two different things. It's just called this way. And JavaScript is going to be the closest thing to a programming language here. So we can go ahead and go back to this thing and create our script.js in the same folder. Again, press yes. And again, you can open this with Blocknote and go on from there. So going back to your presentation. Again, same as CSS, we got refer. We're going to say to our HTML that the script exists and that we're going to use it in this website. This is going to be in the head tag as well. And you guys can go on your, whatever website, and you can press Ctrl-Shift-I. And it's going to open the console, as you can see. And make sure you're on the console tab here. And you're going to see a bunch of weird stuff. But I'm showing this to you guys because here, in our JS, we can write our first line of code, right? The hello world line. In other languages, it would be like print, echo, or whatever. But in JavaScript, it's console.log, and then your message in there. And if you put that in there, you open your website, open a console, you're gonna see your hello world message in there. That's how you do printed to console in JS. And now you can also get reference to your elements on a website. That's pretty cool because you can get the reference and modify them through JavaScript. So here we can use documents.querySelector and specify a CSS selector in there. So as we saw earlier, here you see I combine like the div and ID tag. So you can actually combine CSS selectors. It's pretty cool. And yeah, so JavaScript is always var. There's no like types or anything. So I just made a variable of element here. Now, thinking about this, that it's actually not going to work this line of code, because it's like a very, very beginner mistake, and I do it as well. If our script we saw earlier is here, and then we have our body content, what's going to end up happening is we're going to try to find this element before it even exists, because the page didn't load till the end yet. So one way of solving this is just putting our script at the end after all our elements are created. But nowadays, the proper way that's even cleaner is to just add the defer tag and just still put it in the head. So defer is gonna make sure that it loads after all your elements in the body tag are loaded. So not everything will work. There's arrays. So that's how you make arrays in JavaScript with the square brackets. You can make arrays of like numbers, strings, whatever. And the really cool part about JavaScript is like objects. So you can use curly brackets. They're similar to like Python dictionaries, if you're familiar with that. Right. So key values. And you can see I got a couple, and you can put like position there as like an object within an object, right? So you can do some pretty cool structures. This is also the same as JSON, if you're familiar with that. The for loop, of course. So we'll use a for loop in this case. So we're going to try to create like 10 elements, right? So first we have like an element in our website already. We're going to get a reference. We're going to loop 10 times, and we can use the append function to add elements to an element. And you can get the body here with document.body. So we're adding the same element to the body. But the thing is that this code won't work, actually. The error is we're using the same element, adding the same element back. So there's only going to be one element because it's the same element. So what we want to do is have 10 different elements and add them to the website. You can do this with clone node and true, very important true there, because it's going to clone not only the element but all of its content, and then it's going to add it to the website. So this is a good way of doing it. And we can also create an element. So it doesn't need to exist already in your website. So you document create element, the tag name, and with this element reference, now you can customize a bunch of stuff like the class name or the text content that's in there. And then we can add the element. But again, this code won't work because there's a fundamental mistake here. One way of solving this is putting the element in the loop, so we have 10 different elements. But previously, we had only a single element again, right? So this way we have 10 different elements, and make sure that they're all added to the website. Another cool thing is strings. When we want to like put values inside of strings, it kind of gets messy with the typical way. So JavaScript has a really clean way of inserting values. So you can use the quoted for string, but you can use the special character like the tilde there. And once you use that, you can use the $sign and curly brackets and put values in there. So it's a lot more readable. Okay, so now we're going to try to add this data to our website. Okay. So this is an array of objects with name it here. Okay. Well, we could just take the document body. There's this inner HTML property. That's a string. And you can add string to it, and it's automatically going to transfer to like an HTML proper element. But as you can see, it's not working because we're just adding this array of objects, and JavaScript is trying to convert to a string, but it kind of fails to. So what we need to do is convert this array into an HTML list of objects, right? So this is one way of doing it. So we have this item to HTML function. That's how you declare functions. So function, function name, and your parameters are all in the parentheses, and you can return whatever value you want. In this case, we're returning a string here again with a special caret symbol, so we can insert some values in there. So I just basically wrote JavaScript HTML in a string, right? And at the end there, same trick, document body in HTML, but this time we're adding the data and then we're mapping it. So mapping an array means you go through the array, you take the array item and you convert it to something else, right? So in our case, we're just converting like an object, right? So each object here into a string of HTML content. And finally, we're joining all of that because if you're mapping an array, it's going to return an array, but we want a string at the end, so we're just joining that all together. We can simplify this further, so we can actually put this item to HTML directly in the map function there. So as you can see here. And then we don't need to specify a name for this function because it's like a simple function. And even further, we can simplify this by writing it with this notation, so with the arrow symbol. It's just another way of writing function in JavaScript, and it's just a lot simpler. And when you're using these small functions, it gets very convenient for the readability. You can also convert this even further simple. So here the difference is that once we have this arrow function notation, we can actually go ahead and remove all the return syntax and directly just say, okay, this is the input, I'm returning this directly. And finally, the last thing we can do to simplify this even further is we have this item parameter in there, but we can, since it's an object, we can use the what's called the deconstructing operator. So instead of having the reference of the object itself, we're getting the reference of each field that we want to focus on. So in our case, it's name and tire. So as you can see, we simplify our stuff a lot, to be a lot more readable. So right, we went from this to this, and here we can see, okay, we have data, and we're mapping it to HTML, and this data we're taking a couple of these fields and putting it in the HTML, right? So that's how you would add data typically to a HTML file through JavaScript. In JavaScript, a big thing about JavaScript as well is events. So let's say you have a button, you want to know when you're clicking the button or when you're tapping on an input field. And so this is all done through events. You can do the add event listener on any HTML element that you want. It's going to give you, again, a function with an event parameter to give you more detail about what event it is. Yeah, this is like the third way of make sure that JavaScript is ready. So instead of having to defer on your script or putting your script at the end of the page, this is sort of the third typical way of doing it is just having the load event on your window and just put all your HTML manipulations in there. So this would be an example on how to create a button and do something when you click on it and then adding it to your website, right? So it's called, there's like a click me text in there, and when you click it in the console, it's going to say, whoa, nice. And yeah. So for JavaScript, that's pretty much it. That's the very basics, of course. So here's a great resource as well. So MDN Web Docs, always good to know more about JavaScript. There's a bunch more events in JavaScript. You can also have classes similar to like Java. There's things known as web components, and there's also like async awaits, which are useful for like fetching data and making sure everything arrives in a certain order. And there you go. Now you know how to make a website. Now what's next? Well, there's some pretty cool stuff to look out for. So there's WebGL. You can use the canvas tag actually to pretty much make a game in your website or whatever you want. That's very customizable in terms of graphics. There's things known as progressive web apps. There's WebAssembly. There's also like WebSockets to do like multiplayer stuff and so on. Apart from that, moving forward, nowadays you would use frameworks. So React is a very strong one, of course. React is like a better HTML. There's Sass, which is like a better CSS, and TypeScript, which is like a better JavaScript. TypeScript is like JavaScript but with types, so a bit more similar to Java in a way. And to put that all together, you can use Next.js, which is a full framework, meaning it's React, but it also has the backend customizations as well. And JavaScript was invented initially for websites, but the project Node.js aims to have JavaScript used for anything else. So it basically makes JavaScript a real programming language that can be used for server side or just for app development. There's GraphQL, very useful sometimes in sort of bigger projects with more organized data for database and networking. And finally, you're going to end up using what's called NPM, Node Package Managers, to manage your dependencies with all these frameworks. So yeah, I hope you enjoyed this presentation. This is my email on the screen. If you're curious about my personal website, it's right there, stephcraft.net. And yeah, if you want to cut it on LinkedIn, this is my QR code. And yeah, this was the first part of the workshop. I hope you enjoyed. You want to plug your computer? Or you can use mine. Okay. Okay.
All right. Before we start, we have to take a brief sponsor break to thank one of our sponsors, DigitalOcean, for sponsoring this event. And they just wanted us to show a little bit what they do at DigitalOcean. It's essentially a cloud service provider which you can use to host your web apps or whatever else you want to host. This is kind of their selling points they wanted us to show.
By the way, we are providing, they do provide credits for using their platform if you want to use their platform for free. Like more information about how to get these free credits can be found on the Hacker Resources page. There's somewhere called Sponsored Resources, and you'll find how to get credits using like a promo code for DigitalOcean. It's really helpful for the cloud application fundamentals.
Yeah, for those that are online that didn't hear that, so we have on the Hacker Tracker resources page a link to where you can get DigitalOcean credits if you'd like to try it out for this event. And let's just go through these because there's quite a few slides here. But yeah, essentially a global cloud service provider that they have a lot of features. It's fully featured, and it's perfect for your first web app. All right, thanks to DigitalOcean. Now let's. Okay, so I wanted to. I guess I'll just show that thing I prepared. Switch this tab. Okay, I wanted to show sort of. Oh, it's not presented on that screen, is it? Yeah, okay, I want to show a little bit how we can go with what Stefan had showed us with all of the basics of HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, and how we've brought that into the way we do web development in the modern age. So essentially, the issue with web development before was that manually writing event listeners, like Stefan showed, and like entering in the content in the DOM very atomically is very slow. It doesn't. It's very imperative, and meaning that all of the things you want to do, you have to describe them in a very I'd say it's low level as far as web development goes, and you have to go as far as describing each of your actions and dealing with all the pitfalls that come from having to clone nodes manually to have the same element, like the same content twice on the page, to having to manually add and remove event listeners. And we've gone past that in the modern age as of this decade to web frameworks that take care of most of that for us. They abstract on top of HTML, CSS, and JavaScript another layer of abstraction that is very useful for making reactive applications. And nowadays, the comfort that they have brought has made them become useful in virtually every web development project. It's very rare to see a large website that is these days built without using at least one of these frameworks. So yeah, we've heard about React. Everyone's heard about that, and we've also there's also a lot of other options. It's not the only option. You have Vue, which is very popular, Svelte, which is becoming more popular, Angular, which is becoming less popular, but is still a great option if you're trying to make something very solid in enterprise. And we also have some up and coming frameworks like Solid, which is very promising in my opinion. Quick, and there's a few others. There's, as the joke goes, there's a new JavaScript framework every week. And on top of that, we've even more recently came up with the idea of meta frameworks. So those are JavaScript frameworks that are not only on the front end. And that's kind of what I want to show today. It's full stack JavaScript frameworks. So the idea behind these is that the code that you have, it doesn't need to run only on the user's device, but can also be rendered on the server beforehand. So you have stuff like React 18, which is coming out with server components, and frameworks like Next.js. And then all of these other frameworks also have their equivalents. So we have Nuxt for Vue, and we have SvelteKit for Svelte. We have SolidStart for Solid, and we have all this stuff coming out within the last few years. And it's really providing a revolutionary web development experience. It's the next revolution. After web frameworks, now we have meta frameworks, and that's the next big change. And we even see these used not for necessarily only like fully React applications. Let's make this a bit more interactive. I can show some examples. Why does it do that? It's weird. Okay. I like my cursor back. It's down. Okay. I want to show like Astro, which is a really up here. Astro, which is a really great way of building websites. So if you don't know the distinction between a website and an app, essentially a website is a mostly static piece of content that is like a blog or a personal website, where an app is something that has interactivity, it has complicated state management, it's usually full stack, and there's a lot more to an app. But for a website, and that's something that we've historically only done with vanilla JavaScript, even until recently, we started coming up with some really great solutions like Astro. Before Astro, there was Gatsby and some other options for blogs. But Astro is a really great example of using modern technologies to do something that we used to do and do it even better than we used to do it. So Astro, what it will do is it will let you use, this is not sponsored by Astro, but I love Astro. Okay, Astro lets you use any of these frameworks you want, so literally any framework, deploy to anywhere, and it outputs vanilla HTML, JavaScript, and CSS. And you're like, why don't I just write it in vanilla in the first place? The thing is that the developer experience using React is a lot better than just vanilla JavaScript, HTML, and CSS. And you can write, like, you can add these components to your front end and have them hydrated on the front end, which means that the code that you write on your computer that is like just visible on the website doesn't it's not reactive when it first loads, but then after it loads, it is hydrated, which means that the JavaScript is loaded in after the page loads, and then that is what adds the interactivity to your React component or your Svelte component. So you could have a React component on one side of the page, a Svelte component on another part of the page, and it all works seamlessly together. And the the bundle size, which is something that we talk about a lot, is like the size of the JavaScript that's rendered on the page, because we're always trying to like reduce the number of like bytes of JavaScript that's shipped to the user, right? Because that makes the website faster. So the bundle size is very low, is very well optimized because of technologies like Astro that let you just strip everything you don't need out of the bundle size. And Astro's not the only example like this, but this is just the best example I'd say for websites. But then we also have technologies like, let's go to Next.js. So Next.js is a React framework that has completely dominated React recently. Originally, people wrote React with like some create React app thing or whatever, but create React app has been mostly like phased out. People still use it all the time, but it's not as relevant as it was when it first came out, or as it has been for a while. And now Next has taken that spot as the prime way that people use to start like their new React web app. So Next.js is similar to Astro in the sense that it also ships vanilla HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, but the way it goes about it is very different. Astro is focused, Next.js is focused on providing a like application experience, and it's just focused on React, while Astro has more of a website experience going on with it that is for all frameworks. But the thing that Next.js offers that is very powerful is a routing solution. So the ability to have different routes for different things on your page, which means like when you go to /login/ register or whatever, you don't have to manually handle that. That it's all taken care of for you. There's client-side routing. It has font and image optimization, like streaming your HTML to the front, and there's a whole bunch of other features. I'm not sure if they're talking about all the things that I love here, but like TypeScript support, which is very important. It comes with data fetching solutions, which means that there's a way for you to get your data from your backend, from your database, from wherever you have it, onto the front end, and it's very easy to use. And all of this stuff is kind of what Next.js ships. And normally with React, you take care of all this yourself. You could go and get like a state management library. You could go and get a routing library. You could go get a data fetching library. You could put them all together and make your own React stack. But Next.js is just the easiest way, and it, as one of our sponsors is Vercel, it deploys very well to Vercel, because Vercel is actually one of these companies that sponsors Next.js. They are the ones like basically paying for its development, but Next.js is still open source software, and it's just used by everybody. And if you guys want a great example of something built with Next.js, the tracker app that we've been using throughout this weekend, which was built by my team, was built entirely with Next.js. And if you want an example of something built with Astro, you can look at our hackthehill.com website. So hackthehill.com is Astro, and you can tell it's lightning fast to load. It's on purpose that thing loads afterwards, but otherwise it's very fast to load. And if you look at our tracker, maybe that doesn't look quite as fast, but the features that we have on that tracker are much richer than anything I could have done easily with Astro, and we're really using all of Next.js's potential to its fullest capacity. So that kind of covers what I want to talk about as a bit of a prelude to diving into how to create React components and how to work with this technology. All right, so let's, if I can figure my cursor. Okay, let's create a new window here in VS Code. And no one can see this. Is there a way mirroring it? Don't know how to do that. Well, I'll just drag it. All right. So I guess the first step will be open a folder in here. Let me just find. Just create a new folder. Okay. Just create a new folder and open that in VS Code. And essentially what I want to start with is a bare bones Next.js application. So we're going to bootstrap one of those. Can we all see my screen? Zoom in a bit. Okay, so the way you can bootstrap a Next application is a whole bunch of different ways. There's these new client CLI for bootstrapping different stacks that are very well thought out, and one of my favorite ones is called Create T3 App. So you would do it would be, let's see if I remember the command. Yeah, it'd be this command. But this is kind of a little bit beyond what I want to cover today in this workshop, because it includes other solutions for your database and for the rest of that. So maybe we'll cover this a little bit later, but that's one of my favorite solutions for bootstrapping a Next.js application. But Next.js also comes with a Create Next app, which is just a very, very good solution as well. So I'm going to run this command here. And if you guys are not familiar with NPX, NPX is bundled with Node.js and NPM, and it stands for NPM execute. So it just executes this create next app command with the latest version of it in the current folder. That's what the period's for. So once you run that, we'll ask you some questions. Would you like to use TypeScript? The answer to this is always yes. If you answer no, you're putting the wrong answer. Would you like to use ESLint with this project? That's a bit more opinionated. I personally do use it because I like having red underlines when I have code style mistakes. Maybe you don't care about your code style as much, you don't want to use it. I don't know, maybe you have a different solution. But I'll put yes for this as well. This is just asking if we want to have the project inside a directory called source, or if we just want to have it like in the main directory. It doesn't hurt to have it in a directory, so I'll just put it that, yes. This is an experimental feature that they want to know if I want to use. For this workshop, we won't use it because it's experimental, but I'm looking forward to seeing how the app directory kind of evolves and hopefully becomes stable sooner than later. All right, and then it's just asking for an import alias, which I'll also leave as the default. So that's kind of the experience you get with these command line interfaces. It just asks you a few questions. You put a command in, it automatically goes and installs my dependencies. It's installing React right now, Next, TypeScript, and ESLint, of course. So we can see on the left side here that it's created all these files, and let's just kind of go and explore what is created and what they all mean. So I guess the first file to look at would be like the README. This README is it's called README because they want you to read it. I know no one reads READMEs, but the point of it is that it actually tells you everything you need to know to work with this application. So it tells you what to use to run the development server. It tells you how to it gives you a little bit of a tutorial here. And of course, once you're ready to actually make this your own app, you would erase everything in here and put your custom text explaining how to use your own website or whatever, your own app, whatever you built with this. And I guess the next thing to look at would be the package.json. So the package.json is often overlooked, but is one of the most important files in a JavaScript project. The package.json specifies some dependencies and which version of those dependencies you are using. So that is basically the way that the package manager can determine which ones to install when someone bootstraps your application. And then it also has these scripts here. And these scripts are made available inside your command line. So if you put like npm run, in this case dev, which is the script at the very top there, it will run this next development command, and it will start up our development server as described. Did I spell it wrong? Yes, I spelled it wrong. It will start up your development server as it's described right here. And then once the server is started on my port 3000 in this case, I can just open it up in Chrome. And I have the Next.js starter template code right here. But we don't want to use starter template code, so let's look at how to modify that a bit. And I guess I'll skip over some of these other files, we'll come back to them later. So in this case, the source directory here contains our pages. And this is how I was talking about earlier. We have a routing solution with Next.js. And the routing solution essentially means that we have each file or folder in this directory corresponds to a page on our application. So I have index.tsx right here, because that's the index page. This will become the index.html in the output. And if you guys aren't aware, index.html is like a special HTML file name, all right? So if you have an index.html, then that is the page that is available at the root of your application. So if I just go to localhost 2000, that is the index page that's being rendered right here. This is the same thing in a vanilla JavaScript application. It's not specific to Next, but here in this case, you have index. And you can see it's not .html or .ts. It's the TypeScript file, but it's a TypeScript file with JSX inside it. So JSX is the syntax right here that looks a lot like HTML. It looks a lot like what Stefan was showing you earlier. And I'm going to cover everything about it in a few minutes. But this syntax essentially lets you have your JavaScript and your HTML, and even if your CSS, if you want to, all co-located. And everyone talks about separation of concerns, but separations of concerns is not a concern, I guess, here, because we've decided that having everything in one spot lets you develop faster. It lets you see what's going on in a more efficient way. And we separate our concerns differently, not according to like what is styling, what is markup, what is interactivity. But now we've kind of started separating our concerns in terms of what is like a front-end page, what is a component. You know, like we have different components. We can separate our concerns in terms of if you're using a library, like there's class name libraries, and different concerns can be like all of our buttons that are primary buttons have this certain class name, and then all the buttons that are secondary have the other ones. So that's another way of separating those concerns. But yeah, in this case, we have everything co-located. So for example, here we have this paragraph tag. So we learned about those earlier. And then the text inside there is basically what is going to be rendered here. There's a special thing right here. Don't know if you guys have seen these before, but these are called HTML entities. These exist in HTML normally, and in this case, this is a non-breaking space. So instead of just rendering a non-breaking space, we have this right here. So this is just equivalent to a space. The reason we have to have this here is because by default in HTML, your white space on the sides like this is all stripped out. So you need to have something, or else there would be no space between these two blocks. If you want to do it another way, you could also do this. It's not exactly the same thing, but in this case, it's using the curly bracket syntax to interpolate this space character, essentially, at the end of this this text. So yeah, so now that we can like have this, we can change something. So yeah, it's telling get started by editing this file, which is the file we're in. So let's say that we want to, where's some text to change? Let's say we want to change this and get started by editing, blah, blah, blah. We can change it to, I don't know, hello, hack the hill. If I can spell. And then we can see here, it instantly reloads the page. And like if I had this page, can I do that? Side by side with this one. That's a bit too crammed. It's there. And I change the text right here and let my thing save. It's an instantly thing. So as soon as I change the code and like save it, it will instantly change on the application itself. And this is called hot module reloading. So you have here, see it says it recompiles the TypeScript and everything like that. And it can do it in like a quarter of a second. So it's very, very fast. And the way this works is you have a WebSocket server that is essentially just watching for file changes and sending those to the front end, and you have instant feedback. So that's one of the greatest things about web development is that you have this ability to have instant feedback. In so many other fields, you have to work on a project for weeks, months, or whatever before you can even get any semblance of what it will look like. And even in web development, you have the issue of it taking time to get stuff to your customers. Like, let's say you're like working on something and you want to just get feedback on a certain part of it, but you're not done it yet. Another thing that we can talk about later is the ability to make preview deployments with Next.js and Vercel. But yeah, the ability to have instant feedback while you're developing in your code editor. You have TypeScript that is giving you the fact that this is going to be a string, right? It tells me this is a string. It knows that with certainty because of the types in this project, which gives you instant feedback on that. You also have ESLint, which will give you feedback on, I guess, co-styling mistakes. Let's see if I can make a co-styling mistake on purpose. If I return, this is unreachable code. Yeah, here's the co-styling mistake. See, I return here. I return, let's say, like null. This right here is not. This is a function, right? This home component, because the way that components work in React is that each component is a function. Okay, I should have gone over this earlier, but each component is a function. In this case, this component is the home component, which is the component that is rendered on your home page, right? And in this case, I'm telling it to return null, and all this code right here is not being used because you're returning here, and now you can't, of course, use the code that comes after the return statement. And see, we have this like ability to have linting directly inside your code editor, and with that instant feedback is where we have the developer experience being as good as it is. So let's make this hack the hell not spelled wrong. Yeah, okay, let's go over making a more basic component, and let's strip out a lot of this stuff in here. So I'm just gonna strip out all the code that is added in here that is not our code. And then just like start with something very basic. So this right here, we can leave it, but it's basically, this is your head element. And in case you guys realize, this actually is a capital H. Capital H signifies that this is a component and it's being imported from Next. We'll just delete that as well. That's kind of important because we'll just delete everything we're not using anymore. All right, so you have your next head component, and inside there we're putting our page title. We're putting a description of the page. This is just a meta tag, which is used for like search engines and like SEO purposes. If I paste a link to this in Discord, you would see like this part right here as like description of the page in Discord. This is just also meta stuff. It's kind of for backwards compatibility that we have to use this. And then just using the favicon. So that's the little icon you see right here in the corner. That is coming from this file. It's telling it to reference the favicon file right here. So yeah, we have inside our inside our component, we have the head, and then after the head, we have a main element. And in this main element, we can place the contents we want to render. So this is kind of where we're going to discover a bit of like the basics of how to make a React component. So if you want to render just like a simple tag, like in this case, you want to render a heading, that's a very good idea. You can just put h1 like that, and then put the text, and it'll render it. We have some weird CSS going on here because they have, let's just delete everything in this file, and everything in this file. So all the CSS has been cleared out. Yeah, so you can see we have the home text being rendered there. This is something you could have done in any like vanilla project. But now let's show a little bit like of more of the advanced capabilities of React. So you could have a variable up here, and we can say like const text. This is declared as a variable called text, and we can put hello world, like the value, the string hello world, in this text variable. And then if we want to render this text variable right here, we can just put curly brackets, and then we can put the word text in, and it'll render that hello world out. And maybe this doesn't seem that impressive yet, but you'll see the capabilities we have from this is that we can do a lot of stuff. Let's say we want to have a let's say we want to have a string that starts an empty string, and then we could like loop through something and just add to the string, sure. And then we could put that string here. And now we have a whole bunch of numbers. But see how easy that was? Just built the string with 100,000 numbers. And that's kind of where you're at with the capabilities of React. Let's go in to see a little bit more. So let's say instead we want to have a text here. Let's say we want this text to be, let's remove this. And also this is another thing we have with Next, which is this overlay that explains to us, okay, string is not defined because I just deleted it up here. So that's something you have to remove for the page to be rendered. Okay, so let's go a little bit more advanced. So we say, let's say we want this to be a heading 3. We don't want this to be just a hello world text. We want it to be a heading 3. We can actually just put heading 3 right here, and then put our hello world text inside that heading 3. And because of the powers of JSX, now we have a heading 3 that's being rendered right here. But let's say we want to have like a component that generates like this text, right? We don't want to have it like just put in here in line. We want to have an actual component for it. We could do like a component, so we just make a new function. So we can do, I'll do function keyword because it's easier to understand. Function, and we could do heading, and we just declare this function, and essentially we just, yeah, return that h3. It's hard to type without looking at it properly, but okay. This h3, and we can delete this now. And now we can, instead of putting this text variable like this, we can just reference that heading component with a capital H because it has a capital H here. And that does exactly the same thing. So this lets you put components in, and I can copy paste this component as many times as I want. I can put it wherever I want. The state of this component is fully managed by this component. That's kind of what I was talking about with separation of concern, because these components are kind of individual, like individual separate parts of your application. Alright, so we have this heading being rendered in. Now let's say we want to have it so that there is a button on the page. So let's take away some of these and add a button. It's just a button. And it's just an HTML button. We can put some text in it. And we want to make it so that whenever this button is clicked, now this text here, there's going to be like a number beside it. We can have like a count number, and we want that number to increase. We have a count here. We'll put like a number after this, and we want to click here to increase that number. All right. So well, I don't really need a component for this anymore, but let's put this actually. Let's call this not heading. Let's call this counter, and we'll put all the logic for this counter inside that component itself. So we have counter, and counter is right here, and then inside this component here, we'll put that button. You see, the thing is, one pitfall you might see is if you put this button right afterwards, that's not allowed, because you can only return one JSX element from your component. So what we have to do is wrap this in we call a fragment, which just looks like this right here. It's like kind of like an empty HTML tag. And that fragment lets you have both of those being rendered in as part of the same component. You could, of course, use a handy div and do it this way if you prefer having a div around it. Depends on what you're trying to do. So let's just leave it like this for now. So we want to have a counter. So I guess, does anyone have any ideas about how we would go and implement this? How would we add a number right here? I want to have a number here. How would I add that number? Not 0. We want to have like just a random number here. We want to have like the number that is assigned to a count variable. We have like a count, and then we want to have that count number show up right here. Does anyone have any ideas? With any ideas? All right. Okay, so in this case, like I showed you guys earlier, we have the ability to interpolate variables in React. So that's what this is showing me right here, Copilot. So we have count. Maybe I should disable Copilot for this workshop because it's kind of not helping me, is it? Disable. Okay, so we have the count here, and that is just once we close that tag, we can see that count being rendered in. It's taking a second. Okay, we can see that count being rendered in right here. Okay, now we want to increase this count whenever this button is clicked on. So we have to do two things for this. We have to make it so that when this button is clicked on, something happens, and we also have to make this count state here not just be a variable. So React has these handy primitives. They're called hooks. And in this case, we want to use a hook called useState. useState is very descriptive of what it does. It lets you create a piece of state that you can use. So const, and then you can, the way that we typically do this is with destructuring. So you have, I don't know if you guys have ever seen the ability to like say like A, B, and then like A is equal to 2 and B is equal to 3. I don't know if you guys have ever seen this syntax before. We're going to do the same thing here. We're going to do const, and then we're going to put the first thing as our count, and then second thing as something called set count. And set count is a function that will let you change this count. So we can put useState, and then I'm going to not on purpose import it to show you guys kind of what the problem is here. See, this useState is cannot find name useState. The thing you have to do is go to the very top here and go import useState, and you can import that from React, from the React library, and now you have access to this useState hook. So it returns a stateful value and a function to update it. So yeah, this is what this is. This is a stateful value. This is the function to update it. So in this case, we have our stateful value right here, and now we just need to call the function to update it. So we need to find a way of doing that. So if I go here in my button, and I add a, let's make this more clear actually. Okay, we add here to an attribute to this. So you know how he was showing you earlier, we have like ID, we have a few attributes we can use. In this case, we want to use a, it's not an attribute that exists in HTML normally. There's something similar, but it's not the same thing. And if you're using it in HTML normally, you're doing the wrong thing. But in React, the right way of creating an event listener is just adding the name of the event here, preceded by the word on in camel case, and that will let you do that. And you see how I have all these suggestions here coming from TypeScript. In this case, I want onClick. And then onClick lets you pass in a function. So we have this function here called setCount. I can't just pass that in directly because I want setCount to be passed in with the value. But I can add a handle click function that doesn't exist yet, and then go in here and create a function. So I'm just using the function keyword, and I'll show you guys another alternative to that in a second. But this handle click thing takes in a event, and event, I don't know where that came from. And the event in this case is of type React dot click. Oh, something is what's it called again? It's React dot event handler. Let me see if I can remember this. It's React dot event handler or something. Yeah, I can't because I use Copilot for this part, to be honest. But I did not misspell event. No, I misspelled event properly. Well, it's not important to type here, but well, we can actually we can infer the type. That's actually one thing we can do, is we can infer the type here. So we can see that this handle click, well, in this case, it's taking any, but let's just leave it like this. As you can tell, one thing that you can do with TypeScript that is very useful is you don't actually have to like follow up on these red errors. You can kind of leave them alone, and it will still work. So I mean, of course, before you want to push this code to production, you would want to follow up and like add in the correct type here. But for now, we'll just leave it like that. And inside this event handler, we want to go and do some logic. So the first thing you want to do in a lot of cases is you want to prevent the default behavior of this button. That's kind of the same thing you do in vanilla JavaScript, and the same thing you do in this case here. So event.preventDefault essentially lets you take this event and prevent its. Oh, I misspelled event here, is what you're saying. I don't think that changed anything though. I can barely see what I'm spelling. Okay, prevent default lets you say, okay, when this button is clicked, we don't want to do the default behavior, which is to go in and like, let's say there's a form around this button. We don't want to go and submit that form. We don't want to do any of the default behavior. We just want to do some custom logic. And inside here, we will do a set count. And we can just take the set count and then set it to the count plus 1. So what this will do is every time this function is called, it will prevent the default behavior and then update the count to be 1 higher than it was previously. And there's an error here. Oh, I have a closing thing here, yeah. Gotcha. Okay, so that should work, and when you click on this, it increases the count by 1. So that's kind of a simple way of doing this. There's, of course, what you can do is you can turn this right here into a simpler function. You don't technically need this right now because we're not using a form, so you can also just leave it like that. And then you can also take this function and turn it, I have a caps lock on. You can turn it into a just like a variable, and it does the same thing if you make this an arrow function. And the advantage of doing that is that it's easy for us to take this arrow function here and then just put it directly in here and not have this. I kind of actually prefer having it as a separate function outside here, but that's another option if you want to. It's just a matter of taste. So we have this whole thing. I was gonna get Copilot to help me with that type here before we leave this, because I know it's yeah, that's what it is. Oh, you have to pass in the name of the element that you want to do it. So React.mouseEvent, I thought it was quick event, but okay. React.mouseEvent, and then you pass in, because this is a type argument here. So you have this type, and it takes 1 argument, and this is the button that you want to pass in. So yeah, you pass in the type, and then you can do this. And if you put the code directly in here, I believe it can infer the type for you. And that's kind of how you go at creating a basic counter. So let's make this not an H3 because it looks weird to have it bold. All right, so that works and it does that. All right, how much time we have left? We only have a few minutes left. Before we continue with this, just showing you some of the basics of React here, I want to show you kind of an example of what we built with this before this workshop as a demonstration of something you can do, for example. So I built this little project here that you can see the code for. It should be on this GitHub. Yeah, exactly. It's right here. And essentially this shows, they're currently matched, but this shows our YouTube subscribers and Twitch followers. If you guys go and subscribe on YouTube or on Twitch, and I reload this page, you'll see the number update. It's kind of a very simple website, but the reason why I built this was I want to show kind of some of the more full stack logic behind creating a dashboard like this. So let's just show the code for this. So yeah, here we have the kind of the same thing as I was showing you guys earlier. It's also create next application. That we have the title here. We have the actual heading that you can see, this one. And then we have that text with the link. And then one of the things that we're doing here is we're adding these class names. If you look at the class the attribute in HTML, this class name is essentially the same thing, except in this case I'm importing the styles object using CSS modules from this file right over here. And so this description class that's coming from over here is the one that we're using here, for example. And flex is coming like from here. And essentially I just have some CSS defined. Anyway, I have this card component. And this card component, I have this new thing I haven't shown you guys yet. It's called props. So props are a way of adding your kind of your own custom HTML attributes in a sense. They're not HTML attributes, but you get the idea. So you have title, for example, which is set to this. And then if I go into my card component, so the place I put my components in this folder called components, it's kind of a standard thing to do. And I have this card component that has a title, right? And that title is being rendered out inside this heading 3. So we have card component with the title. We have the number being passed in here. This number comes from the props here. We have an icon. I'm just getting this from Font Awesome Icons. So it's just a useful library you can add just to import it, and then you get those icons. I have a color defined, and then that's kind of the same thing for YouTube and Twitch. And then the way I get these props, so you may be wondering where these come from. So this is something called get static props that Next.js like 12 and earlier has. 13 changed it a bit, but it's the same idea-ish. And in this case, these static props are props that are available from the server. So all this code that is being called in this get static props here is run on the server. So this is not front-end code. This is back-end code. And a very important distinction here is that you can use a lot of capabilities that you wouldn't want to necessarily have exposed on your front end. This revalidate one means every 1,000 milliseconds or every 1 second, this is revalidated with one of Next.js's features called incremental static regeneration. And if you look at, maybe I shouldn't, is this important? I don't know if this is important. Incremental static regeneration is super cool though. Incremental static regeneration is this amazing feature, and it allows you to have a static page that is regenerated on the server every X amount of seconds if a request comes in. So if no one accesses your page, then there's nothing being run on the server. But then if one person accesses your page, it will update that page so that the next person that accesses it already has the new information. It's kind of a more dynamic way of keeping a static page up to date. So we have that ability here to do that, and we have the YouTube subscribers that are being fetched from this function, and the Twitch followers that are being fetched from here. So YouTube subscribers is more simple. I have this fetch request. So this is just using JavaScript fetch, and it's just like running on the back end. And you have this fetch to this YouTube API, and you put in the ID of the channel. And you also have here this process.env.youtube API key. And I won't show that file, but I have an env file right here, and it contains this YouTube API key. Let's just create a new, I'll do it .env.example, and I'll just show like what that file would look like. So you have YouTube API key, and then followed by just a random string of text that you get from the YouTube, like not from YouTube, you get from the Google Cloud Console credentials page for YouTube. If anyone wants me to show you how to do that afterwards, I'm willing to, for sure. So this is YouTube API key, and then you have like Twitch client ID coming from somewhere else, and then you have, you know, Twitch client secret, etc. Those are these are the values you would get from Twitch and from YouTube, and they're being imported here with this process.env. This refers to the node process itself. These are the environment variables on it, and this is the environment variable in this case. So you have this fetch request. It fetches that data, and that just returns you a raw response object. So you see TypeScript telling you it's a response. The response object has a JSON function that just gets the JSON of the body. And then once you have that, you can go through and find the first item, the statistics of it, and the subscribers count, and return that. So that return value is coming here. And then once it comes here into the props, it's coming into the options, the props you have here. And if you want to infer what the props you'll have here are, you can use this nifty infer static props type that infers automatically the right types for these props. If you didn't have this right here, it wouldn't know that this is like what this is. It would say it's implicitly in any type, means it has no idea what type it is. In this case, it could be it could be a number, it could be a string, it could be anything. So this tells you what types this is. Specifically, well, I guess it's saying any anyways because I didn't cast the value, but like let's say I had, because when you have a fetch request, it obviously doesn't have a type by default. But let's say I had like this as number, and then I would have here number. So it's coming, that's being inferred through here and then through here. But well, yeah, number here is supposed to be it's actually supposed to be a string that, because I made this prop, this component here, in its prompts take in a number as actual. It's actually a string instead of converting it twice. So we have get YouTube subscribers, and then we have get Twitch followers. So get Twitch followers, we had to do something kind of complicated here, as I was fiddling around with last night, but essentially we have to get your access token from Twitch before you can actually get your Twitch followers. So we have to make a first request here to the OAuth endpoint. It's a post request with a JSON body, and you just have your JSON that has your IDs and your secrets and all that. And then from that response, you can get your access token, which is now being used here to make the second request. So this is a request to the Twitch API to get the followers for our channel, which is our channel ID. And then you just get, this is just like publicly available, so it's not a big deal to share it. Then you get the access token passed in here in the authorization headers. So these are your HTTP headers that are being sent to the in the request. And in this case, we have what client ID we're using here also passed in. This is something that Twitch asks for, not something that you would normally have to put in a fetch request. And then from the response, you can get the total number of followers. And then that total number, of course, is being passed through back to here, and then into this prompts, and then back to here, and then through here into the Twitch followers, into the card component, and then being rendered out inside here with that curly bracket interpolation just right here for your viewing pleasure. Let's look at some other stuff that we have in here. So this is a section element. I don't know if we talked about them yet, but this is kind of going with the idea of having semantic HTML elements. That's kind of something that we talk a lot about in HTML. People maybe not are aware, but like HTML is actually a complicated language that has a lot of best practices that are not super easy to know about, and there's a lot of pitfalls that you can go to. You can make an HTML page on your first day of learning it, but there's so much more to learn, and there's so much that comes from backwards compatibility, and there's also just more that just comes from being a fully featured language. But in this case, we're using one of HTML's things that it has, which is a section component. Sorry, not section component, section element. And a section element, it's not showing me right here because it's not an HTML file, but it would tell you like a section element is used to represent a section of the page. And inside a section element, you can have a heading like this. And now this heading here is being used to describe the section element. So if I had a screen reader and I was going over my page and didn't actually see any of the contents of the page, but I was using the screen reader, it would tell me that there's a section here with this heading. And that's kind of the part that's important, is the section element lets you encapsulate that. If this was a div, it would look the same to the user, but the difference would be that screen readers wouldn't know that this heading here is the heading for this entire section, right? So we have the icon here. This is coming from the Font Awesome icon library, like the same one I was showing you earlier. And I'm just passing in the name of the icon here. And then I'm also passing, this is some shorthand syntax, but I'm passing in like, this is just a style, like these are both like not part of the library, but this is a style thing. This lets you declare inline CSS. So I'm using it here as well. It lets me declare like the border color to be the color. So I don't know if you guys know, but like normally in CSS, when you have like you want to have border color, it's just it's hyphenated, right? And then you put, can I spell red? That's hyphenated. But in React, nothing is hyphenated. Everything is using the same camel case convention. That's not obviously valid CSS, but it is valid React. So the only difference here is that this rule is now, instead of being hyphenated, this rule becomes camel case. And that is why we have like this class name here. This class name is actually because it's not called class In JavaScript, it's called class in HTML, but JavaScript actually calls this class name. And that's the reason for that is because we have, of course, the class keyword that is more important and for use to actually make like classes in the sense that they're used in other programming languages. But yeah, here we have the border color, and that border color is being set to the color that we passed in. We also have the color here, which is like the text color, being set to the color itself, and the shorthand, of course, is just to remove that. And if this isn't like obvious, we have like this as an object here. So like if I create like a variable s, I could do const s, and then I can put that code in its own object somewhere else. That's the same exact thing as what I was just doing earlier, but that's why it has that double curly bracket syntax. It's because you have the curly brackets represent the prop, and then inside that you also have an object. And then yeah, so that's the border color, that's the color itself, and then we have the styles coming in from the CSS modules I described earlier. So if you look in this card.module.css file, you see you have this card style, the icon style, the number style here. And then the paragraph tag that is getting the number class. Okay, that kind of shows like most of the stuff that you need to understand to use this. Of course, there's all those other files here that we don't really care about as much. There is this file that just kind of says what ESLint is supposed to do. There's a file for TypeScript telling TypeScript what to do. There's this file that you can completely ignore telling the package manager what to do. There's this one telling Next what to do. And there's a license and a few other stuff, but the important files have been mostly covered. And we kind of covered over some of the bases of React. I guess we have a few more minutes left, so, well, not very many more minutes. So I just want to show one more thing, actually. Let's go back to the other project. Quickly. I want to show something like called like data binding. So data binding is this really cool thing you can do, which is beyond creating an event listener that just updates this one variable. What if we also want to have this be a two-way thing? So we have the variable coming from here and also the variable going back there. So we can create a input element in this case. The input element will have its value set to this variable. So we can say like count. Well, maybe not count. This kind of counts a bad example. Let's do text. Let's make this change this example up we have. So we have like, instead of calling it counter, we have it like, I don't know, text, and then, I don't know, text with input. This is not a very good component name, but it's better than nothing. Okay, so we have that. We can erase most of this. We have this input here, and we have text being passed in here. So now we have the value of this text thing here. Let's put this to a string, so we make like, this is, by the way, in the use state, you have here the default value. So this is the default value, is just hello. So if I go back here, the default value of this input element is just hello. Now I want to make it so that whenever I want to also put like a paragraph tag, and I also want to put the text there. Come on. So you can put the same variable in there twice, right? So you have the same variable in here twice. Now I want to make it so whenever I change this hello, well, it's not letting me change this hello currently. But whenever I change this hello, I want to also make it also change this hello. And the way I would do that is I would do onChange, and then I would do handle like, I don't know, input, or handle change in this case, I guess would be better. And then declare another one of those functions. And then, yeah, it's just kind of giving me the class here, but this is my change event for my HTML input element. And then inside here, I'm going to just set the text variable, like the set text state right here. I'm going to set it to the current value of my input element. So this is the event.target. So this is what is like throwing this event, and then its value variable right here is like the value of that currently. And then we can just have that right here. So then we change this, it changes there, wow. And as you guys saw when I deleted it, it also actually deleted the whole thing. There's no text anymore. Well, it didn't delete the whole thing, it made it height 0, but same idea. So this is pretty cool. And if you want to compare this, like code here, especially if I take this out and put it in as a like an arrow function like that. Well, I can use E instead of event to make it even shorter. You can see how like little code this is. There's hardly any code here. This is like, what, you can maybe count this as 3 lines of code, 1, 2, 3. If you want to do this in vanilla JavaScript, you'd have to have a event listener. You'd have to have that, of course, prevent default. I guess you still need that here. So you have to have the event listener, which is different, and you also have to have something that goes in manually updates the text content of this element. And if you want to have like multiple of these, and you want to have them going, like maybe you want to have 2 input elements, you want to have to go both ways. We could try that right now. Or anything else beyond that, it just becomes a lot more complicated, a lot faster. We can do that. So we have, come on, yeah, same exact thing. And I believe this works. Yeah, so we have the same thing. And now if I change it here, it also changes the other one. They act kind of as if they're the same elements, of course they're not. And the way that React is doing this, by the way, in case you guys are curious, is React is not going in and figuring out, oh, that I changed this one here, and then this one is linked to this one here, and this one to manually change this one here. That is not all React's approach. React's approach is very kind of heavy-handed. It goes in and sees, okay, I changed this one here. Let me just destroy this entire thing and re-render it with a different value. So this element here is completely being destroyed and re-rendered. And React takes care of all that behind the scenes. If you guys want a more like careful approach because you're really worried about all that performance, and React is not good enough for you. React is very fast though, so I don't think that's really going to be a big concern. But if you're trying to build something and like maybe you're building an e-commerce site and you want to have the number of milliseconds that your page loads is equivalent to like thousands of dollars of revenue, and if you have it like load 1 millisecond faster, that's like, you know, like a big deal, maybe millions of dollars revenue, whatever it is, depending on what scale you're at, then you can look at other libraries. And I know like eBay, for example, they develop their entire own like front-end framework because they really want it to be optimized even faster. But some of the best ones for like having that atomic ability to just update this and have only this like area change. I mean, React does that too. React scopes what it re-renders. It doesn't re-render the whole page, just re-renders the section it needs to re-render. But if you want to have it being even more atomic, that's one of the things that Solid has to offer, is that ability to do that. Yeah, that's pretty much it for this. I guess we have like, well, -3 minutes. Does anyone have any questions? No questions? Anyone have any comments? I don't know. Yeah? No? There's someone, I thought you were looking behind that, but no. All right. In that case, if anyone has like anything to ask me about or ask Stefan about, we're both here, as well as a whole bunch of other people that know a lot about this stuff. And if you guys are planning on getting careers in web development, or you're just really interested in web development for personal projects, this is a great field. There's so much for it to offer, and especially with all of this amazing technology, with like this stuff coming out every day, the experience for developers is getting better and better, and the tools we're using are getting more powerful. So there's a bright future ahead for web development, and thank you all for attending this workshop. Thank you.